Are you prepared to retire with purpose? To retire knowing your savings is invested to meet unavoidable needs and expenses.
It's not how much we make during the good times, it's how much we keep during those really bad times.
Certified financial planner Casey Weade is president of Howard Bailey, an advisory firm that believes successful retirement begins with a detailed financial plan personalized to help achieve your life's purpose.
Whatever risk you faced, we've got a plan.
The Howard Bailey team is committed to practical financial planning so you can enjoy family and the future without uncertainty or stress. Stay tuned and learn how you too can retire with purpose.
Good to see you again. Welcome to the program. I am Lee Kelso here with Casey Weade, certified financial planner and the president of Howard Bailey Financial. We focus on helping guide you toward a successful retirement, and one of the ways that you do that, Casey, is with something called weekend reading for retirees. Tell me more about that.
That's right. We do a weekend reading for retirees and pre-retirees where I provide 4 articles directly from my inbox to your desktop, or directly from my desktop to your inbox, I should say, that really help you make sure you're staying abreast of what's going on in the markets, or the economy, or taxes, or whatever it is that's going on right now that might affect your retirement. And it's really difficult for most people to get good factual information out of the internet because most of the articles that are out there are trying to ultimately sell you a product or a service. And I'm able to help people sift through all that garbage and all that sales lingo that's out there and provide you 4 articles every single Friday that will also be accompanied with a little commentary from myself. And I'm not going to inundate you with email after email. It's literally going to be one email every single Friday delivered to your inbox. And you might also find a link in there for a podcast as well.
So is this going to be professional level information? Is it down at my level at the consumer?
You know, it's a blend of each. We'll have articles that are very factual from sources such as financialplanning.com and investment news. We'll also have articles from CNBC or Fox News or Bloomberg, for that matter, that give you information, factual information that you can act upon, and not just something that's ultimately a sales pitch. And it's all areas. I think one of the neatest things is a lot of the things that I'm reading every single week. The reason that we ultimately started putting this out is both Marshall Johnson, our vice president, and myself do a lot of reading. And every once in a while, we'd say, hey, why don't we send this out to our clients? Or why don't we send this out to the families we work with? And we said, well, why don't we just put together 4 articles every single week and do this? Because people are really enjoying the information we're able to provide them.
And there's a lot of talk these days about changes in the IRA. Rules and regs because of the new tax law. What do we need to know about there?
Yeah, well, one of the articles that we recently sent out to the families we work with as part of weekend reading for retirees and pre-retirees was from a gentleman named Ed Slott. He is the premier advisor when it comes to IRAs, a premier expert when it comes to knowledge regarding tax qualified accounts, IRAs, 401ks, 403bs, etc. And this was an article that was sourced from financialplanning.com. If you'd like to sign up for this article and get future articles, you can go to retirewithpurpose.com and sign up. This was an excellent article, in part because I'm a big fan of Ed Slott. We actually sent our advisory team to a 2-day event that Ed put on previously earlier this year after all the new tax laws came out, because we do focus exclusively on working with retirees and pre-retirees, and almost every single one of them that walks in has an IRA. Right. And that IRA is sometimes referred to as a tax time bomb because now you've got the majority of your assets that you plan to use to satisfy your retirement income needs, your healthcare needs, your emergency needs, your inflation needs, all tied up in this tax qualified account. It'll come out as ordinary income, be taxed as your highest marginal tax bracket. And Ed provided us with an article that lists out the 5 different things, 5 strategies that almost everyone should be implementing this year, largely due to some of the major tax changes that came out of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act itself.
That's so important because it allows you to escape some taxes.
Yeah, and Ed explained why Roth conversions this year are such a bigger deal than they have been in the past. You've got a huge opportunity this year because of some of the major changes we've seen in tax brackets and your marginal tax brackets, the tax rate that you're ultimately going to be charged when you take distributions from your IRAs. Due to some of these changes, you have a huge opportunity. Ed said, you know, taxes are on sale right now because if you look at the taxes, for instance, for for married couples filing jointly, now you see that the 15% bracket went to 12%, so that's 3% lower. Might not seem like much, but that's 20% lower. And then you've got the next bracket at 22, and then going on up to 24%, and then it goes up from there. Michael Kitzes, who does a very popular blog and retirement researcher, he used to share with us that it was common sense to convert your traditional IRA to a Roth IRA in 10, 15, all the way up to the 25% tax bracket. But that 25% bracket capped out at about $150,000. That didn't leave room for very large Roth conversions. And now the 25% bracket's been eliminated and replaced by the 22% bracket. And then we see the 24% bracket going all the way up to $315,000 in taxable income. And we've seen a doubling in the standard deduction. So you could conceivably be converting hundreds of thousands of dollars each and every year from your traditional IRA over to a Roth IRA. And now you've diversified your tax buckets and provided yourself a place where you can take tax-free income in the future. You don't have required distributions, and you can ultimately leave it behind to your heirs tax-free as well, and lock in tax rates that we have today. And Ed Slott at his event said, I would recommend people convert all the way up to some of the highest tax brackets that are out there, even the highest. And he said that's really because of the situation where we find ourselves in today. We're most likely going to have higher taxes in the future than we have today. And if you factor in Social Security taxes, you factor in potential Medicare premium hikes due to excess income, it really presents a great argument for Roth conversion this year over any time in recent history.
There's something else in the tax law that is meaningful, and that is a qualified charitable distribution. And as I understand it, basically that's don't write a check for a charitable distribution. Go directly from your IRA to the charity, and that way you get some additional tax advantage.
That's right, Lee. You've been paying attention, I guess.
Yeah.
And you've been reading some of the notes, maybe even read the article for that matter. I know you get weekend reading.
Yep.
And this is a big deal now because of the changes in the tax law. Because it used to be, we've got a lot of families that tithe, right? And they would maybe receive their distribution, then they'd tithe, or maybe you're just sending money to charity every single year, and you used to itemize your deductions and be able to claim actually get benefit out of that deduction. Now, fewer and fewer people can actually itemize their deductions. So when you make that charitable contribution, you're not actually getting a deduction. You're not getting any benefit out of that when it comes to tax time. And now what you can do is take distributions directly from your IRA and send them on over to charity directly, or send them to your church directly. And now it's not for everybody, because you do have to be over the age of 70 and a half. And so it's a great tool for your required minimum distribution. If you take it personally, not only may you not be able to deduct it, but it might affect your Social Security taxes as well, might affect your Medicare. Now you can just send that right to the charity, and you can do that up to $100,000 a year.
All right, so let's boil that down just real quickly. So if the RMD is going to push you into a different tax bracket and give you new exposure, here's one way to escape that.
Yeah, and if you're giving a charity anyways, you should be making that directly from your IRA to the charity. There's no reason not to.
Another change in the tax law are fees that are no longer deductible. Explain that.
Right. Well, investment advisory fees for working with your financial advisor, if you're working with a fee-based advisor, that is, used to be deductible out of a non-qualified account. So you wouldn't be able to deduct charges inside of your IRA, but that led a lot of advisory groups to say, okay, instead of us taking your fees equally out of your IRA and your non-qualified funds, we'll take all of the advisory fees out of your non-qualified money and we can deduct them. Now they're no longer deductible. And so now it makes sense to shift those fees that you were paying out of your non-qualified account and move all of the fees that you're paying to your advisor out of your IRA, in a sense getting you a deduction.
There's something else called the Prorata Rule that you need to be paying attention to.
Yeah, this isn't something that widely affects a lot of people in a big way, but it is something to keep in mind. When the IRS calculates your RMD, for instance, they're going to aggregate all the different accounts that you have out there, all your IRAs, 401ks, SEP IRAs, and that's ultimately going to be used to determine what your required distribution is. I think a bigger deal is for some of those high income earners out there, if you've been making non-deductible contributions to an IRA and then converting to a Roth IRA, also known as a back backdoor Roth. This was for people that had too much income to contribute to a Roth IRA and still get money into a Roth. This can be a very important concept. If you have other IRAs out there, they're going to aggregate these things. So if you put $5,000 into a non-deductible IRA, convert it to a Roth IRA, well, now let's say you have a $120,000 IRA out there somewhere else. Well, they're going to aggregate those things. And in the end, you're actually going to create a taxable event to the tune of $4,800. Okay? And you didn't even know you were going to create a taxable event for yourself, but ultimately you did due to those aggregation rules. Just exercise caution if you're using that backdoor Roth strategy. It's excellent for some, but if you have any other IRAs out there, it might still be beneficial, but it's going to be very difficult to track and it might get you in trouble in the future.
Wrap it up real quickly with we need to plan those RMDs. You got to take them.
Yeah, it's coming towards the end of the year. If you don't take your required distribution, you could face up to a 50% penalty, or you could face a 50% penalty tax, as well as ordinary income tax on the distribution that you failed to take. And if you're turning 70 and a half this year, something you might want to think about doing if you're going to retire. I've had families that turn 70 and a half, and we say, you know what, instead of taking the distribution this year, let's push it to next year, and we'll have to take 2 the following year, but your income's going to be lower, and that'll be more advantageous. So just making sure you're abreast of the RMD you're going to have and planning for the future of what that might look like is something you need to do this time of year every single year.
So if this is the kind of information that you're not getting talking to your current advisor, I hope you'll pick up the phone and give us a call right now and request a complimentary consultation with a member of the Howard Bailey team. We'll talk a little bit about fees and expenses, some of these tax rules that you may not know about. Take a look at how much risk might be lurking in your portfolio that could hit you in the next downturn. And then also, how can we plan for a lifetime of income that you can't outlive? So call right now, the number on your screen, and get in line for one of the complimentary financial reviews with a member of the Howard Bailey team and put yourself on path toward retiring with purpose. All right, we come back in just a minute. We're going to talk to our guests. Our viewer questions are coming up next.
At Howard Bailey Financial, every dollar has a purpose. We call it the purpose-based retirement. A certified financial planner will help you decide what you need your retirement money to do for you. We put together a written plan that puts your dollars exactly where you want them to be. And we put every dollar to work to maximize your retirement efficiency. For a higher level of insight and care, choose the purpose-based retirement from Howard Bailey Financial. Call us now to set a complimentary consultation.
Just before the break, we were talking about some ridiculous fees and expenses that many people might be paying in their 401k. And during the commercial, Casey told me a story that I want you to hear. So recap that.
Yeah, well, I had a gentleman I've been working with for now going on 4 years, and he wanted me to take a look at his aunt's account, who he was the power of attorney for, and he wanted to know what she was paying in fees and expenses. He said, I know we're paying 1.25%, 1.25% for advisory fees, but we're in a lot of different mutual funds, and I want to know what we're really paying in fees and expenses. So we x-rayed that account, and we were able to show him was not only was she paying the 1.25% a year, but on top of the 1.25%, on a $235,000 account, she had $4,200 a year, over 2% a year in mutual fund fees and expenses. So she was paying over 3% a year. She was paying over $7,000 a year on a $235,000 account for a 90-year-old gal that needed well less than $7,000 a year to satisfy her retirement income. And that's what got him fired up. He said, they're taking more money out of this account than she actually needs every single year. This isn't right. This isn't fair. Let's fix it.
All right, so there you go. That's the reason you need to ask those questions about those fees and expenses. And we've got an opportunity for people to ask questions right here on the program, and that's what we're going to do for Steve. Go right ahead, Steve.
Casey, I am 57 years old and plan to retire next year, but all of my retirement is tied up in a 401k plan. Is there any options for distribution that won't result in a penalty?
Well, Steve, that's a good question, and one that you need to be asking. No matter if you're out there and you're thinking about retiring early, if you're thinking about retiring before 59 and a half, you need to ask this question, because retiring before 59 and a half and taking distributions from most qualified accounts, like an IRA, for instance, is going to cost you not just taxes, but a penalty tax. And that would be a penalty tax of 10% for those distributions, and then, of course, your ordinary income tax. But Steve, there are some things you can do, being that it's still in a 401k 401k, and I'm assuming it is still in a 401k, you have a pretty neat opportunity. So once you separate from service, there is, well, you might call it a loophole, but there is a provision that allows you to take distributions from 401k, directly from a 401k to you personally after separation, after the age of 55, so you don't have to be 59 and a half and avoid that 10% penalty tax. Now, if you've already taken those funds from your 401k and moved them into a traditional IRA, you're not completely out of luck. You just won't be able to take as large a distributions probably in order to avoid that penalty. You might have to do what's called a 72T, or a substantially equal periodic payments. And when you do that, you get a little bit each year, and that avoids that penalty tax. And that can be an option for you as well. You might also want to look into hardship distributions, or distributions for education or disability. We have worked with families in the past that have been able to qualify for disability and take these distributions from their 401k or IRA without incurring a penalty. So there are things that you can do. Just make sure you're asking questions like this if you're going to retire early. Great question, Steve.
All right, let's jump up to Auburn and Reggie. Your question.
The stock market got me to retirement, so why would I put it anywhere else after retirement?
Well, Reggie, there's a reason that when you're driving down the road, you look in the rear view mirror and it's substantially smaller than the front windshield, or your back windshield is typically a lot smaller than your front windshield, because the risks are ahead of you. And that's the way that we need to be paying attention as we step into retirement. We can't be looking backwards and saying, well, I made 10% last year, so I'll just leave everything alone. There's a lot of research that today shows in this economic environment, specifically with low interest rates and high market valuations, that taking distributions and just staying invested in the stock market could result in a very low likelihood of success, that those funds will last for the rest of your life. And it's largely due to something called dollar cost averaging, which you've been doing during your working years as the market ebbed and flowed. When it was low, when it was inexpensive, you bought more of the market with those dollars you took out of every paycheck and put in your 401k. But when the market was expensive, essentially you bought a smaller piece of the pie. You reduced your cost over time to buy into the market by dollar cost averaging. But when you step into retirement, now the opposite can occur. If we step into retirement with a major pullback, or if we retire when the market's overvalued and we experience a recession, well, or a correction for that matter, now you're violating the number one rule of investments. Now you're starting to sell when the market's depressed. And a good example of that is if you went back to 1989. I mean, a great time to invest in the market was 1989. A lot of the baby boomers out there made the majority of what they are holding on to today during that period of time. From 1989 through 2008, you had one of the biggest bull market in history, and then you had the lost decade. And during that period of time, the market averaged about 8.5% a year for 20 years. If you started with $1 million and took $50,000 out every year from 89 through 2008, you would have turn $1 million into $3 million, and you would have spent $1 million along the way. And if you would have reversed those returns, though, if you would have started in 2008 and went backwards throughout time, had the same annual returns but in a different order, now you've retired in an expensive market, which is seemingly what we're looking at today. Now you would have said the same scenario, $1 million drawing $50,000 out a year. 20 years later, you would have been left with $235,000, and now that $50,000 distribution now represents a huge chunk of what you have left, and you're running the risk of running out of money over the next couple of years in all likelihood.
All right, we're going to get to an email question now from Ronnie in Mishawaka writing, is there any reason for me to ever split up my IRA into multiple accounts?
Well, Ronnie, I think there really is a good reason, but you don't have to. All your IRAs that you have out there, a lot of families want to consolidate these things. You set up one through E-Trade, and then you got one through a brokerage account. You got one through a broker. You got an IRA that was set up at the bank for a CD. You just picked up all these different IRA accounts over the years, and that can be very kind of confusing and difficult to track at the same time. So sometimes we want to consolidate these things. But I think when it comes to planning for retirement, it makes a lot of sense to kind of break these things up for psychological reasons, if nothing else, because a lot of investing success and retirement success has to do with psychology. So let's take this for instance. Let's say that you're stepping into retirement, you've got this IRA that you need to start creating income from. Well, if you just take, say, a $500,000 IRA and leave it invested and keep it diversified, but you leave it invested in this moderate growth account, and now next year you find that you're down 20%. Your $500,000 turned into $400,000, and now you might be in a panic saying, I need this money to last the rest of my life. I can't afford this loss. I can't wait for it to go down another 20%. I'm going to liquidate. I'm going to move into cash. And now you've put yourself in a position where you have to figure out when to get back in, and you may end up losing out on that upside that comes next, which happened to a lot of retirees during 2008 that sold at the bottom, and they just, in some instances, just started buying back in over the last couple of years. What we need to make sure we're doing is, I believe, separating those accounts out for different specific purposes and saying, you know, I'm going to carve a portion of my IRA out and I'm going to set it over here. That's going to set aside funds for my next 5 years worth of income. And that's in a conservative, maybe even an ultra conservative portfolio. Then we set aside another piece that says, I'm not going to touch this for 5 years or 10 years, and that's more moderate. Then we have our most aggressive piece that might be more like the S&P 500 type risk profile that we're not going to touch for the next 15 or 20 years. Now, if we get a 20% pullback, maybe the 500,000 as a whole is down 20%, but the funds we need to satisfy our next few years of income needs, well, maybe it's only down 5%. Maybe it's not down at all. The funds that we don't need for 5 or 10 years, maybe that's down 5 or 10%. And the funds that we don't need for 15 or 20 years, maybe that one's down 20, maybe even 30%. But we say that's okay because I've got today's needs taken care of. I know I'm okay. And you end up not panicking.
Oh, I like that kind of thinking.
Yeah, that's just one of the many options. You might do it for Roth conversions at the same time or RMD planning. There's a lot of reasons to split up IRAs into separate accounts.
So if you want that kind of thinking on your team, here's what I hope you'll do is be one of the next people to pick up the phone and call right now and request a complimentary review of just what's going on in your portfolio. It's a chance to sit down, and I think the phrase you used earlier was X-ray the account to find out what kind of fees and taxes you might be paying that you might not know about. We'll take a look at exactly what's your risk, what kind of exposure do you have in the market, and then how can you create income you can't outlive. All things you'll cover in a complimentary review with a member of the Howard Bailey team if you get on the phone right now and take that first step toward retiring with purpose. Okay, let's get to our question of the day, and it's an important one. It is, what is the percentage of applicants aged 70 to 79 denied long-term care insurance due to health issues? We have the answer when we come back.
At Howard Bailey Financial, every dollar has a purpose. We call it the purpose-based retirement. A certified financial planner will help you decide what you need your retirement money to do for you. We put together a written plan that puts your dollars exactly where you want them to be. And we put every dollar to work to maximize your retirement efficiency. For a higher level of insight and care, choose the purpose-based retirement from Howard Bailey Financial. Call us now to set a complimentary consultation.
All right, let's answer our question of the day. What percentage of applicants aged 70 to 79 are denied long-term care insurance due to health issues? Casey?
Well, unfortunately, when you need it most, typically between the ages of 70 and 79 and beyond, this is typically when you get denied that coverage. And sometimes we wait too long to get it implemented. The answer is 45%. 45% of those between the age 70 and 79 applying for long-term care insurance are getting denied, even if you start early. The ages between 50 and 59, 17% of those applicants are denied long-term care coverage as well. I think it's always a good idea to get ahead of the game, just as I did for myself, and a couple I'm going to share with you in just a moment. The reality is 1 out of every 2 Americans will need long-term care at some point during their lifetimes. So I'm going to share with you an example of a couple that are in their late 40s, early 50s, and they said they wanted to get ahead of the game because they had experienced long-term care expenses devastating a friend of theirs and their family, and they wanted to make sure that didn't happen to them. So we wanted to evaluate multiple strategies in order to make sure that they were making the best decisions for themselves. One idea would be to use a Roth IRA. Using a Roth IRA gave them flexibility, gave them the ability to have a retirement account they could use for other things. And at their age, it may grow fairly substantial for them to use for long-term care needs in the future, traditional long-term care insurance, and a hybrid approach. When we evaluated these three different options based on total cost, we found that the hybrid option offered the lowest total cost, and that was $5,000 a year for 15 years, and then they would never have to pay into it again. They liked this idea given that they wanted to use some other dollars to put elsewhere, and they didn't want a long-term commitment like they might see with traditional long-term care insurance or a Roth IRA. And traditional long-term care insurance wouldn't come with a guarantee that those premiums wouldn't rise over time, and if they did, it could become the most expensive option of the three. Then they are also concerned with walkaway value. What if we want to walk away with some funds in the future, things change, and we decide we no longer need the care? Well, a Roth IRA gives us the best growth potential of those dollars long term, while a hybrid approach finds us a middle ground between long-term care offering no reimbursement and the hybrid approach giving us at least some dollars, if not all the dollars we paid in, back if we decide we no longer want to have that type of product in our overall retirement plan. Then they wanted to take a look at death benefit. One of the things they hated about traditional long-term care insurance is its use it or lose it nature. Roth IRAs will most likely give us the largest death benefit tax-free we can leave to the heirs, but the hybrid approach will actually still give us a fairly substantial tax-free death benefit, and again a middle ground between traditional long-term care insurance and the Roth IRA. But what about the most important thing in my mind, and that is, well, what if I need long-term care? What's it actually going to pay me in the way of a benefit? Traditional long-term care insurance gives us arguably the biggest and best long-term care we can actually get, with a $600,000 pool starting, growing over time. And that's the biggest benefit of that traditional long-term care insurance, is that inflation rider of 3%, where 30 years into the future when they might need the care, that benefit's grown from $600,000 all the way up to $1.5 million, and their long-term care monthly benefits $12,000 a month. With the Roth IRA, it's whatever's in the account at any given time, and they can take it out, of course, at will and whatever they actually need to. When it comes to the hybrid approach, they're going to get $5,000 a month, and it's going to provide them an unlimited pool of long-term care benefits that they can use, and that would be, again, kind of a middle ground, hence the word hybrid. If we set these things side by side, I think it's difficult for us to declare a clear winner, because it depends on your very own needs, your goals, your desires, your concerns. The Roth IRA is going to give us the best option for walkaway value and death benefit long term, while the hybrid approach is going to give us the lowest cost. And the traditional long-term care insurance approach will give us the biggest long-term care benefit we can get of all three of these different options. So the decision is ultimately yours, but you have to work with an independent advisor that actually has more than one tool at their disposal, so that you can actually see how these things stack up for you in your own very unique situation.
You want some options presented and not just led down a path? I hope that you'll be on the phone calling Howard Bailey right now and request a complimentary review of exactly what's going on, your risks in your portfolio, the amount of taxes you're paying, fees and expenses you could be paying, and is there a plan for long-term income and, in fact, the long-term care we just talked about. All those things are something you can review and sit down with Casey or a member of the Howard Bailey team and get a better understanding of what the options are that will set you on the course toward retiring with purpose. So be on that phone right now, and we'll get you started down that path. And of course, you can always visit retirewithpurpose.com to request a copy of one of Casey's books, to sign up for his weekend reading for retirees, or to find his new podcast there. And I hope you'll check it out. It's retirewithpurpose.com. We'll see you next week.